Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Torres. Today live here from our studio in Poblenou, Barcelona. So if you are listening to this podcast as normally we just post audio, this is a good opportunity to see us live. So follow the link in the show notes. And if you're already watching us on YouTube, hello. Today we're going to speak about a very relevant topic, especially in days where growth in FMCG or CPG is not a given, which is incrementality, which is one of the big words or levers brands use when measuring their success on the digital shelf. But the question is, what does incrementality actually mean, and how do you measure it, and is it even attainable? To some, it may be a bit of a myth. So to better understand the concept and how best-in-class brands build up to it, I'm here with Jack Lindberg, who's the head of product and a bit more at Shalion. Hi, Jack. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome to Barcelona, by the way. When did you get in?
I got in Sunday afternoon. So
Okay. So
coming from New York, it's a nice overnight flight.
yeah, nice. How do you do with these overnight? Like, do you call them red eye flights, right?
Yeah, that's what people normally call them.
Yeah.
I did make the mistake once of landing on Monday morning and heading right to the office. I wouldn't recommend.
That's why you arrived on Sunday. So
Yeah.
Yeah. So where do you live normally? In New York
In
City?
New York City and Manhattan.
Nice. I'm jealous. Maybe we can do a house exchange sometime.
Oh, I'm happy to swap with you anytime.
That's great. So are you from New York originally?
I'm from New Jersey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just outside of New York?
Yeah,
or?
didn't make it that far.
Yeah. Well, I mean, having New York at your footstep, at your doorstep, I'm not surprised you stayed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So tell us about, as I said, your role is head of product and much more. What does that mean, and a bit about Shalion as well? We recently, by the way, had a colleague of yours, Gael Peñe, from Shalion as well. We'll leave the link on the show notes. We talked about food service aggregators. But yeah, tell us a bit about your role and what Shalion does.
Yeah, sure. So I lead product for an initiative we call Commerce Media Intelligence. The goal is we want to link digital shelf to commerce media. And we think there's a lot of fertile ground to push those two things together in a way that helps brands think about the customer experience on a retail platform, not in silos, where digital shelf is one bucket and retail media is the other, and they don't talk to each other. We think there's a lot of ways that they can work together to help with measurement, improve customer outcomes. Gael and I work on the same team, but we manage sort of different pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
What Shalion does is we are a digital shelf and retail media data and intelligence and analytics company. We're headquartered here in Barcelona, hence why I'm here.
Exactly. How often do you come?
I'm here probably every 6 weeks.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's really fun. I've been working on my Spanish. I took it in school, but when I got here, I realized how much I had forgotten.
Yeah.
And then definitely struggling with Catalan, as all
You'll get there.
non-Castilians do.
Yeah. Well, no, some of them learn. Yeah. It is a bit of a battle, but they get there. So, and Shalion has been around since when? It's relatively new.
Since 2019.
2019, which actually sounds like a long time ago, no?
Oh, pre-COVID, yeah, the before times.
With everything that's happened. When did you join?
I joined about a year ago.
Okay, great. And how long have you been working in around CPG?
My whole career. So I started agency side, and then I spent a little bit of time in the tech space at PackView.
Okay.
Moved back to agency side.
Yeah.
Doing retail media, either as a media buyer in product, running an analytics team, and now at Shalion, I'm taking my retail media expertise and trying to connect that into digital shelf.
Great. And when you mentioned digital media, is that the same as retail media?
Oh, sorry. By digital media, I mean retail media, but I think we need to think a little bit broader about retail media. Typically means media that I buy from a retailer, but there are other types of media that drive action at a retailer that maybe you don't buy directly from a retailer.
Yeah.
So maybe like a connected commerce kind of term is what we've heard in the industry as the buzzword for that.
Yeah. Is that like programmatic, or is it something else?
It could be programmatic. It could be like digital out of home. It could be in-store display, like a digital display, like or it could be something like a third-party coupon or loyalty program, or social that directs to a retailer. There are lots of things.
Just thinking out loud here, but it could be interesting to do like an episode about like all the different types of media available to CPGs today.
Oh my goodness, there's so many.
Right?
I think it's very confusing for CPGs because typically like a performance media team will own social, but if I drive social to a retailer, is it retail media or is it traditional social? I think you can make a strong argument that it's both at the same time.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, this clearly, they were going towards like a more holistic approach to it, but there's clearly still quite a disconnect, no? Because I think that's kind of what people say, that sometimes, you know, you see a banner in a supermarket and then you go on the website and it's like a completely different story and so on.
Right.
So that's an interesting one. But let's talk about incrementality. First of all, what does incrementality actually mean? Because it sounds really good.
Oh, it's a great buzzword. Every conference I've been to for the last 3 years, incrementality has been the word that everyone has on the tip of their tongues.
Well,
and
which, by the way, is not usual because normally you have one every year, no?
Oh yeah, I think
that one has been quite a constant.
This one stuck around a little bit longer. I think because no one knows what it means. So I guess like I served on a panel a few weeks ago in Atlanta where we talked a little bit about incrementality, and I asked the audience in the room, like, go onto your phone right now and go to the dictionary and look up incrementality. And if you do that, you'll find it's not a word because we kind of made it up. Incremental is a word. Incrementality isn't a word.
Do you know who the culprit is of that?
I have no idea. I wish I was the person who had made up that word, but I didn't.
No, that had trademarked the word. That would be an interesting exercise to go back and see like the first references of it.
Oh yeah, it wasn't me, I think. So what incrementality means to most people in retail media is basically, how do I identify if my ads caused sales? I think that definition is slightly too narrow. Well, incrementality to me is really about cause and effect. It's, did some cause lead to some effect? So you can have incremental effect of anything. So in a CPG context, we typically think about sales as that outcome variable, but you could have anything like household penetration, profit, margin, units shipped, whatever, could be the outcome. And therefore, almost anything could be the input. So how does promotional activity drive total units sold? Is an incrementality cause and effect problem, even if we don't typically use incrementality as a word in that way.
Yeah, it's basically like, an action that provokes a sale that otherwise wouldn't have happened. Right.
In its simplest terms, that's typically how we use it.
Okay, and that's very easy to measure, isn't it?
Oh, it's a thrill a minute, yeah. Definitely. It's gotten easier. I will preface everything we're about to say about incrementality with some hard caveats. One, there's no such thing as a perfect model. Anything you do to measure incrementality will be better than nothing, but not perfect. And if anyone tells you you can perfectly measure incrementality, they're not telling the truth. And two, I'm not a data scientist. I play one on TV sometimes and on podcasts. So I'll do my best today to sort of simplify concepts, make it easier for like an audience of non-data scientists to understand. But if I make a mistake, dear data scientists, please be kind.
But for example, incrementality, we hear it, for example, when it comes to like return on ad spend, ROAS, and they talk about iROAS as an incremental ROAS.
Yes.
Isn't ROAS by itself supposed to be incremental?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So what traditional ROAS measures is what I would call correlation. So basically, you showed someone an ad, and then they bought something.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't necessarily prove that showing them the ad made them buy the thing, which is what incremental ROAS is trying to show, or iROAS. It's trying to say, well, which of these purchases would or would not have happened anyway if I didn't show this person this ad.
Okay. So it's like establishing like a stronger link between one and the other.
Right. So
like,
instead of just like the ad and the purchase happen in sequence, it's the ad caused the purchase.
Okay. So why do you think like incrementality has become like that type of like reference? And as you said, during the 3 years, it's been these last 3 years, it's been a constant.
I think because it solves a few problems in orgs. One is it helps us justify investment. I think with any emerging platform like retail media, it reaches a point where people say to themselves, okay, I started investing in this because it was new, and now I need to invest in it because it works.
Yeah. It's not just a FOMO game anymore.
Right, exactly. So iROAS or incrementality measurement helps justify to the rest of the marketing org or even to your CFO, I'm spending money here not because it's cool, but because it works.
Yeah.
That's why people are chasing after it. It also helps deal with sort of the cross-channel measurement problem of I want to invest where I can measure.
Yeah.
Which poses some challenges. We invested in linear TV for a long, long time without perfect incrementality measurement, and that doesn't mean it didn't work.
Yeah.
So I think we want to be more rigorous about measurement because that helps us say, this is how I know this is working.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean if you can't measure it, it's not working.
Does that come from like the type of promise that with digital you can measure everything? Is that like a kind of result of that?
I think part of the cause of why it's such a big deal is one of the main selling points of retail media is I have what's called deterministic identity, which is a big fancy word for saying I, as the retailer that is setting up this media network, I know who the person I'm showing ads to is the whole time.
Yeah.
And then I can link that to that specific person's purchases, where if I buy ads on Meta, I don't know if someone then walks into a store and buys my product.
Yeah.
But retail media is supposed to be this magic system where I can do closed loop attribution,
Yeah.
where I know who I showed the ad to, and then I know if that same person purchased.
And what do you think of the claims that it can be measured?
It can be measured better than before, but still imperfectly. I don't want people to get the idea that like closed loop attribution is this magical silver bullet that makes it super easy to measure the impact of media from a retail media network.
And for you guys at Shalion, why is incrementality important?
So for us, what we think about is most incrementality measures or ways to conduct incrementality tests or experiments or build that model typically ignore digital shelf. And we think that's a big issue.
Yeah.
I'll give you like a simple example.
Yeah.
Or two examples that might help. So let's say you're buying sponsored product ads on a retailer. Almost every retailer has that type of capability.
Don't practically all of them have
Almost
them?
all of them.
And then it's a difference of like how good the sponsored products are, no?
Exactly. So if I'm trying to buy a sponsored product ad and I'm trying to figure out, does this ad yield sales that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise?
Yeah.
One thing you might want to look at is your ad placement right next to an organic placement of your own product? And the answer would be, if it is, it might not be that incremental because you're already right there on the digital shelf.
Yeah.
A second example that I think about a lot is, okay, maybe you're advertising a product that's 20 euros. Right next to you is a competitor product that's an exact substitute that's 15 euros. No matter what you do, unless someone's a brand loyalist, they'll say, well, these are exactly the same. I'm going to pick the one that's cheaper.
Yeah.
Which the medium numbers in itself don't capture that trend. And if you don't look at those things, you might say, well, my media just sucks. But the answer is no, you're right next to a competitor that has the same product at a lower price.
Yeah. So how can that happen? Like, what's the context of the digital shelf in general?
Can you help me understand what you mean by the question?
Yeah, like why is this happening?
So I think part of it is the goal of all retailers is to balance on the knife's edge of how do I monetize my retail surface area as much as possible without making the customer experience bad.
Yeah, and making them buy.
Right.
You know?
So how do I get them to convert more, but also not be angry at me that I showed them 100 million ads?
Yeah.
So the organic algorithms of these retailers want to show customers things that they're going to buy. And if something's on coupon or promotion, our algorithms typically say, hey, this is what we think people want. This is a good product and it's on a lower price than normal. We think you should put this at the top of the search. And they also put ads right there too.
Yeah.
Because that's where we think the valuable real estate is on those retailer platforms, on site at least.
And then the brands that pay to be on the top get promised incrementality.
Or get promised eyeballs. And whether those eyeballs will be new eyeballs or incremental eyeballs or buy things that they wouldn't have bought otherwise is still yet to be determined.
Yeah, because I was listening to the CPG guys, our partner podcast in the US, speaking to the Power to Purchase Institute in the latest episode, and they were talking about how maybe impressions should also be a metric to look into when investing in retail media.
Oh, I definitely agree. I think there are some big issues with impressions, though. So one of the things that's super important for incrementality measurement is what's called viewability, which is basically there is a standard set by the MRC, which is the Media Ratings Council. So the guys who decide what each of these metrics mean, like the governing body of, I say impression, what does an impression mean?
Okay. Yeah.
So they have a standard that's called viewability, which is basically what does it mean for someone to have seen the ad? Not all retailers, actually a large number of them, like more than half, don't abide by MRC standards for viewability. So when they say, I have an impression, you don't know for certain if someone actually saw the ad.
Yeah.
Which makes it really difficult to do the types of incrementality tests you want to do. So an example of a test might be like an A/B test, where you have one group that you show ad to and one group that you don't.
Yeah.
If you don't know that you actually served the people in the group that you're supposed to show ads to ads, it's really hard to know if that's a good test or not.
Yeah.
So if it sounds like I'm complaining, it's because I am slightly. So to the audience, if you are a brand or an agency, go to your retail partners and say, hey, why don't you abide by MRC viewability standards? Because it makes it so difficult to do these tests if you don't know if someone actually saw the ad. Like, how do I know if it had an impact if I don't know if the person actually saw it?
But shouldn't it be quite black or white, or is it like they could be scrolling down and just skip it?
Right. So part
or is
of
it even more like?
So part of viewability is how much of the ad do you have to see?
Yeah.
Like if I just see a tiny piece at the top, does it count? And for how long? Like if I scroll through it really, really fast, that doesn't count.
Got it. Yeah. And MRC, it sets like a certain standard.
They have a definition,
the time that you're like actually not scrolling past that. Okay. It's incredible that they can even measure that. It fascinates me.
It's very cool. It's hard for retailers to set up, but it causes really big issues for cross-retailer measurement if one retailer defines an impression by MRC standards and one retailer doesn't. I can't compare them, or at least not easily.
Yeah. Is it like the small ones that don't abide by it, or is it actually the large ones that don't?
Most of the large ones are getting better, but not all of them are accredited. The accreditation process, I'm not an expert, is actually a third-party audit of how you calculate those fields.
Got it.
Which not all retailers are willing to do or haven't done yet, but I would highly recommend it. So it's some big ones, and then a lot of the small ones don't have this set up.
Interesting. So you're working like with FMCG slash CPG brands around incrementality and basically linking like their presence in retail media with the digital shelf presence. No, basically, what are they doing right now around getting more sales through advertising online?
Oh yeah. Okay. So there are sort of a few ways we could answer this question. We could start with sort of what are FMCG and CPG brands doing to do measurement at all? Like, what are the options? And then we can talk about methods.
Yeah.
So if I were to try to measure incrementality, what are some ways I could do that?
Yeah, sounds good.
So let's start with the sort of how might you approach, I need to do measurement, who does it? As is a good question to start with.
Yeah, because while there's no like, and I think it will take a while there's no like common framework among retailers, like no standardization.
Right.
It seems like the brands actually have to develop their own measuring capabilities across different channels, no?
So that's one of the best ways to do it is as a brand, I build out my own in-house analytics team to do that type of work. Typically, these are the bigger, more mature brands. If I'm a mid-sized CPG, I have a hard time getting that many people who want to work on my analytics team to do that type of measurement.
Yeah.
The biggest brands have that, but not everyone does. The second option would be you go to your media agency. So whatever agency buys retail media on your behalf and say, you need to do this measurement work for incrementality. Some of them are good at it, some of them are not. The third option would be I'm going to go to a specialty analytics firm, like an analytics consulting firm, and have them do it. There are a bunch of good players in that space. The fourth option is I go to the retailer and I say, you need to give me incrementality measurement. And then the way Walmart calculates incrementality is not the same way Target calculates incrementality because they use different methods. And then when you try to compare them, you can't because they're derived in different ways. And then the last option would be you go to a third-party tech partner. Typically, it's like a retail media activation tool. And you say, you should have an incrementality measure in this tool when my team is buying media. There are some tools on the market that have those. I think none of those models are perfect, so take them as you will.
Yeah.
To me, if I had unlimited money as a brand, I would do it myself.
Yeah.
But that's not realistic for everyone.
Yeah.
So some combination of the other options is probably the best way to put it together if you're looking at your team and you're saying, I'm spending all this money on retail media and I need to come up with a measurement solution now. What can I do?
Yeah, and while there's like things that I'm sure like steps in the right direction, I'm sure there's on one side there's no perfect solution.
Right.
Well, I don't believe in perfection anyhow. But secondly, there's plenty of mistakes that can be done. No.
Sure.
What are the most common mistakes or things that you would say if whatever you do, don't do that?
So I think a big one would be don't assume that metrics that are called the same across different retailers are defined the same way.
Yeah.
Don't think that you can build the one model to rule them all. The one ring approach of Lord of the Rings will not work here.
You'll turn into Gollum if you're not careful.
Yeah, you're not going to enjoy it. It won't be fun. Another one for me is when I ask brands, how do you do incrementality measurement? Sometimes they tell me, oh, I do an MMM model. That could be a good answer. It depends. MMM models, depending on how you construct them, are not necessarily showing you cause and effect.
Yeah.
They can, but not all MMM models by default do that.
Yeah.
I also find, not as an MMM expert, but just someone who's like dealt with CPGs and FMCG brands using MMMs, is they sort of lose their accuracy really quickly. So like if I do an MMM once a year, and then I do a test to validate that the MMM was right at the beginning of the year after I get the results back, the rest of the year, I'm just kind of assuming that those things have stayed true,
Yeah.
which
yeah.
maybe is not
Which
the
the
case
way
anymore.
things are moving. So when you do an MMM, what's typically the output of it? So it's marketing or media mix modeling, no?
Yes.
So what does it actually show you?
So it typically shows you, basically for all the media channels you measure, that could be retail media, it could be anything else. It gives you a standardized way of saying what of the total sales are driven by each of those platforms. So what's attributed to social, what's attributed to Google, what's to retail media, so on and so forth. It doesn't necessarily say A cause B. It usually just say like, hey, when we see social in market, we find this many more sales.
Yeah.
Which can be misleading if you read it the wrong way.
Yeah, because like if we were saying before, if we're going to like campaigns that are supposed to be more holistic and activations that are like, you know, in TV, retail media, out of home, like simultaneously, it's kind of contradictory with the other, no? Like,
For sure.
because TV is more expensive than retail media. Now, maybe the sale wouldn't have happened if it were on both channels at the same time, no?
Right. So the cross-platform interaction effects become important to measure. I think what I've also seen with a lot of brands is we had a lot of conversations over the past couple of years about, hey, ROAS isn't the right thing to measure. And we said, hey, when you only look at ROAS and you turn this metric into the goal, we have a lot of issues. Like we do things that optimize towards ROAS and don't grow the business. I fear and have seen people do the same thing with iROAS. Where they say, well, I can't use ROAS because that's a bad metric to use as a goal. I'm going to pick a different metric to use as a goal. iROAS, that's my new goal. And there's this a concept called Goodhart's Law, which says like anytime you have a metric and turn it into a goal, it stops being a useful metric because people try to game the metric. That I can figure out a lot of ways to make iROAS go up that don't help the business.
Yeah.
I'll give you some examples. Like if I was head of retail media at a brand and let's say I report to the CMO and the CMO says, hey, I need you to drive incrementality. That's the goal. This is what I might do to do that in a way that will get the incremental ROAS number really high, but maybe not help the business at all. So one of the things I would do is I would prioritize platforms where I can readily measure incrementality. So if I have really strong measurement on retailer A, I'm going to spend money there because I can prove that it's doing something.
Interesting.
Even if I say, hey, the business needs to grow retailer B, but that doesn't have very good measurement practices at that retailer.
Is that like, so that's one thing that I guess that you're recommending your clients these days. What else, are you recommending your clients to, increase that, to like, I'm not sure if I would say like increase incrementality.
Yeah, no.
But like just to work better around that concept because it's obviously something to aspire to, no?
I think a big one is like understanding the methods.
Yeah.
So if someone tells me they're doing incrementality, well, how do I know if that's real? Because I think I'll be the first to say like incrementality is something we do. It's not something that I claim is perfect, and no one should. But I hope brands and folks at brands know the right questions to ask to understand if what someone's selling them is real or snake oil. Because I see a lot of people in the space saying, hey, I do incrementality. And because it's the hot buzzword of the day. Yeah. And that leaves brands really at a loss for understanding how to make heads or tails of it. Like who is giving me something that's valuable and who's not. I did come up with some ideas on how to do that.
Let's go for them.
Let me pull up some of my questions.
What does snake oil actually look like?
I don't know. I have never seen real snake oil, and that's probably the point.
No, but when it comes to incrementality.
Okay.
So what are like the typical red flags?
So red flags would be something like they don't tell you how the model works. You say, hey, what method are you using? And they don't give you an answer. Or it's a proprietary model.
Proprietary is their own, no?
Yeah. So if they say it's a secret model that you can't learn how it works, it's probably not real.
Oh, okay.
Anyone who's doing this for real will tell you how their model works because these things are hard to build, and telling you how it works won't help you go build it.
Got it. Yeah.
I think some other questions that you might want to ask would be, how do you control for factors outside of the retail media reporting?
And sorry, who would you typically ask that?
So like if I were a brand and some magic company said, I do incrementality, and you would say, okay, that's great. Here are some questions you might want to ask.
And who would that be? Like your agency?
Could be your agency. It could be a third-party consultancy. It could be a tool. It could be a lot of people.
Okay. Well, let's go for it. What are the key questions?
Okay.
A brand person or a trade person, which we'll ask you about later, should be asking.
Yeah. So a question would be like, how do you control for outside factors? So things like the changes on the digital shelf, seasonality, pricing and promotions, competitor activity, the weather. If you have a seasonal product like Christmas trees or sunglasses or what have you, all of those things.
Yeah.
Important. Do you run experiments? Like, how are you testing that this model is accurate? Or are you deriving the model from a test, like an A/B test or a geo test where you compare region 1 to region 2? Another one would be, are you measuring incrementality across everyone or just the people that you know have seen ads? One of the big ways to get an error or wrong answers from your incrementality model is to self-select the people you measure based on their engagement. So if I just measure, hey, what's the incremental value of people who clicked to people who, not people who didn't click, but people who, or let me put it this way, people who saw ads, half of them clicked, half of them didn't. If I just look at that and never look at the people that never saw ads, I can't really assess whether the ad was the valuable piece or not.
Of course, because you can't really compare.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you break down the incrementality measure by channel, tactic, keyword, audience? Like, how granular can you go in what you're showing incrementality of? Like, if someone just says, hey, this is the incrementality of the whole retailer, there's nothing you can do with that data. It's very difficult to action. Another one would be, how do you handle a concept called ad stock? Ad stock is basically the idea that if I show you an ad right now, the effect of the ad doesn't immediately go away. It like, when I saw that Coca-Cola polar bear ad, I was like, that's memorable, and that's going to stick in my brain.
Yeah.
So when I think about Coca-Cola, I remember the polar bears, and I'm like, that ad stuck with me for a long time. Ad stock is one of those things that retail media doesn't have a long enough track record with, and changes so frequently that there's not like a standard number that you can just stick in there and that's the right ad stock metric.
Yeah.
Like TV, when we've been doing it for so long, we kind of have a better sense of like, if I needed to ballpark how fast TV ads decay, I kind of know. Retail media, we don't have enough data. So you have to go test it and see, hey, I have group A versus group B. How long does the effect of ads in the people who saw ads linger after I stop showing them ads? Is it a day? Is it a week? Is it a month? I don't know.
Yeah.
You have to derive that from an experiment. And then the last question I might ask would be like, what assumptions are you making in this model? All models make assumptions, and you have to be, in an ideal world, transparent about what assumptions you're making.
What would an assumption be, for example?
So a really important assumption in these models is that within a targeted group, so like in an audience, who gets shown ads is random. And that showing ads to you doesn't impact whether I get shown ads. That's not always true.
No.
If I did something that was like past purchaser retargeting, I will never show that ad to someone who's never purchased.
Yeah.
And makes it very difficult to say, well, it's actually predicated on your behavior, whether you see this ad or not.
Then it's very easy to be incremental, no?
Right.
Because you're targeting a loyal customer.
Right, exactly. Definitely like tricky questions to ask. For brands, I think if you push your partners to answer those questions, you might find cracks in the armor.
Yeah.
But that's where I'd start and see what people say.
And then, like, when you're measuring incrementality success, is there like a common framework for that? How do you do it then?
So I don't think there's a universal framework of like, this is what you should do. The best advice I have would be, don't make iROAS or incrementality the only thing you care about. It's probably best used together with some other metrics that might be important. So if I'm a FMCG brand, maybe what I care about is category penetration or household penetration or share of wallet or category lift. I don't know. There are tons of things that are important to how am I sure I'm actually growing the business rather than just am I spending this media dollar well? There are plenty of things that maybe will be rather low in an incrementality model, but maybe will help you maintain market share, for example. So like I buy a ton of ads on my own branded search terms. Sometimes that's incremental, sometimes that's not. Depends on who you are. But that probably helps me defend my market share. And maybe incremental ROAS isn't the right measuring stick to use for that ad spend.
Yeah. It's interesting, no? And I think we're going into a territory where, again, these things are becoming like more holistic and ingrained in the general commercial strategy of a company. And I have a question, which is that I feel like retail media is shifting from e-commerce teams and trade teams to very quickly to marketing teams. They have a bigger budget, and I'm seeing like very proactively the retail media networks really like going after the marketing leaders in CPGs. Are you seeing the same?
Oh, for sure. I think if I ran a retail media network, I would look at a brand and see they have different pockets of money.
Yeah.
And the biggest pocket of money is the brand dollar.
Yeah.
And how do I get access to that? And how do I say, not just the trade marketer or the sales team should be spending money with me, but the brand team should spend money with me also.
I think that's a major shift because I think that, I mean, for the time we've been working, which in my case is 11 years, in your case is like 7 years or 6 years or something like that. I think that the attention and the way that companies were growing was really through their commercial teams, be it with the surge of e-com, with the development of trade marketing and category management. And marketing was just that constant, no? But I don't think there was that much attention on it. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I definitely think what I've seen in orgs where retail media still lives in the sales team is that the coordination with marketing in terms of activation and measurement can be pretty weak.
Yeah.
And they're just doing their own thing with this retail media dollar and not speaking to the folks who are buying upper funnel media. I've even seen brands split their agencies into a lower funnel team and an upper funnel team. Never the two shall meet. Which always seemed weird to me.
Oh yeah, and you hear like retail media networks saying, "Oh yeah, I had a meeting," or retailers saying, "I had a meeting with this customer, with this FMCG brand, and they brought the salespeople and the marketing people, and it was the first time they met."
Right.
Which is crazy to me. I guess that little by little, well, we are seeing like more like, I think there's different models of doing it, but like some people that are doing like omni-channel, which is kind of putting everything together, no?
Yeah, I think also we've seen sales leaders at orgs and CMOs think more holistically about customer journeys.
Yeah.
And realize that the customer hopefully has interacted with your brand before they wander onto the retailer site. And building those cohesive brand experiences makes you easier to shop.
Yeah, yeah.
And easier to tell your story to prospective customers. That if you don't have the right hand talking to the left, which I did it backwards, right hand talking to the left, gets difficult to do.
Yeah, totally. But that's the thing, like if you're going to buy something, if the difference is of $1 or even $2, you'll probably go for the brand. In many, depending on the category as well.
Right.
But you'll go for the brand no?
I think so. I also think the value of brand is one of the things that like most incrementality measurements solutions and techniques do really poorly. Let me give you an example, right? So one of the things you can do is what's called a synthetic control. So when you run a normal experiment, you have a testing control. A lot of the times it's super impractical to set up a testing control group.
Yeah.
Because, for example, most retailers don't let you target search in a way where you can set up a test and control.
Okay, great.
You can't do it. So then what you're left is what's called observational techniques. So I look at what happened in the world, and then I use some statistical methods to figure out what was the cause and effect. And one of those ways is what's called a synthetic control, which is I look at the people who saw ads, and then I rummage around probably in this retailer's customer insights or data clean room platform, and I find very similar people who didn't see the ads and compare them.
Okay.
Right? So I just like find the control group in the wild and look at that in comparison with the people who did see the ads. Nowhere in there in that retailer's platform do you have a measure of brand equity, which was like when people say soda, what brand pops into your head? That doesn't exist in that retailer's platform.
Yeah.
So if you try to do this type of modeling, you miss that when I think of soda, there are only 3 companies that pop into my brain.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's something that, along with what you were saying before, something that can be that has to be developed internally, and then you kind of have to cross-factor that element into it, no?
Right.
Yeah. Because, of course, if you're like a new brand that nobody knows, but you're doing a very aggressive campaign in the store and investing a lot in trade spend, then you can kind of prove that like that.
It's pretty easy to measure, but like...
but that's not the case of most...
Well, for like a CPG brand that are marketing geniuses, like let's say Tide from P&G.
Yeah.
Tide ran that Super Bowl ad a few years ago that was every time you see someone wearing clean clothes, it's a Tide ad. And I was like, oh, so now every time I think about someone wearing clean clothes, Tide pops into my head, which means my brand recall is so strong.
Yeah.
Like when I think about shopping this category, Tide is what pops into my head. If there are ads or not, I don't care.
Yeah. Well, it's these type of brands that are able to, even if they have a lot of competition, like in detergent, super competitive. It's they are able to have like a clear differentiator.
Right. No? So I think like one of the trickiest things for these types of models to measure is value of brand. And I don't want people to take away from this, don't invest in brand because you can't measure its incrementality.
No.
I think that's wrong.
No. It's like something that's kind of the backbone of a lot of things. I wanted to ask you as well, you talked about modeling, and I know that's something that you've done with your clients. I wanted to ask you if you could give me an example of that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So we did some work for retail media incrementality for a pet food brand in the Spain market, looking at identifying which keywords on a retailer's site drove the most incremental sales. So I have an unlimited number of keywords. Where should I spend the money, right?
Which you would say pet food or dog.
So it got really interesting. There were some what I would describe as category keywords that describe the category broadly. They're not anyone's brand name, that were super incremental because they had a product that fit that description really well. Mm-hmm. There were some category keywords that were very, very bad because their competitors had offers that were way better. They were more competitively priced. They met the value prop of the search that the person was looking for a lot more. Mm-hmm. So I think we normally say like, oh, if I'm bidding on a category term, that has to be incremental. And if you don't have a product that like fills that customer's need, spending money there doesn't yield more sales.
Yeah.
And overall, we found something like 15% of the sales the retailer reported from ads were actually incremental. So a lot less than what you were getting. That doesn't mean that those ads didn't serve another purpose, but for incrementality purposes, it wasn't as strong as you would have hoped.
Yeah.
We also then measured incremental share of voice. So
share of voice means exactly?
Share of voice can be defined a lot of ways, but the best way to think about it for me is like we go into a physical store and you have a planogram, mm-hmm. which is like how are things laid out on the shelf. The share of voice metric is basically calculating share of shelf.
Got it.
On a digital shelf rather than a physical one.
Yeah. But like when you look at the shelf, who shouts to you more? Whose brand voice you hear more, no?
Who is easiest to find, who's at the top, who has the most number of products. And we found the places where driving incremental sales was strongest didn't really correlate to the places where driving incremental share of voice was the strongest. So you could pay to become visible and be easily found on the shelf in places that didn't necessarily relate to where you were going to get extra sales.
Oh, interesting.
So maybe if your goal is, hey, I want people to find my brand more and learn about my product, you might invest in one way. And if you wanted to drive sales, you might invest in another.
Interesting. And what was like the bottom line conclusion of the whole thing?
Bottom line conclusion was we tried to help them adjust their investment strategy to say, hey, like these two goals right now don't lead to the same execution.
Yeah.
What do you want to do?
Yeah. So I guess it's been in like knowing that the facts, it's then being intentional with your investment, no?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So moving forward, like what... It's a couple of questions, but I'll ask you in one, but I think it makes sense.
Okay.
Which is, what KPIs would you recommend brands look at moving forward? And what should like incrementality look like and how to blend it in the high-level brand strategy?
Okay. So I think incrementality is a tool in your toolbox.
Yeah.
It's... that being said, you wouldn't build a house using only a hammer. So I think it's part of the puzzle. I think the other KPIs you'd want to look at are things that are measuring growth of the business and health of the business. So a growth metric would be like market share, category share. Health of the business would be things like margin, brand recall, profitability, items that I could drive a ton of incremental sales, but if I lose money in all of those sales, it doesn't matter. So I would want brands to think about sort of a holistic framework for how to piece those things together. One of the metrics that I find is really valuable is what I would call like a blended customer acquisition cost. Mm-hmm. So if you take all of your media spend, not just retail media, but everything.
Yeah.
And then calculate that and divide that by the number of purchases, not purchasers, not number of people who purchased, but number of times the transaction happened. You get how much did it cost to make this transaction happen? And a goal over time is like you increase the number of transactions and the cost to have those transactions goes down.
Yeah, which makes more sense in a blended campaign, no?
Right.
To measure like as a campaign and not necessarily. I mean, I guess that then you can again do and measure like actually every channel how it's worked. But I think it probably makes sense because there's a lot of assumptions that are not correct. No.
Yeah, there are lots of thorns once you get into the weeds.
Yeah, exactly. What would be like the last kind of takeaway? I don't know if it would be like a last takeaway in terms of like what the next year may look like and how things may evolve.
So I think one of the trends that I'm interested in seeing how brands evolve their thinking is what importance do they place on doing things themselves? I think when I talk to agencies, some of the metrics I mentioned about margin and profitability, the agency never has. So yeah, they can put together a really interesting media incrementality model, but they don't have the guardrail metric to compare against.
Yeah.
So I think in the end state, like brands will be doing a lot of the heavy lifting on how to do this measurement in a way that is holistic, but will need help from a lot of people. Like I haven't seen very many brands that are very avid digital shelf crawlers.
Yeah.
And go out and collect hundreds and thousands of retailers of digital shelf data like Shalion does. So our goal is like, we are happy to help you with the modeling. We're happy to do it for you. We're happy to give you data for you to do modeling with. But we hope that you do modeling. Like the answer is not do nothing because it's too hard.
Yeah, don't outsource everything, but create like an ecosystem of like internal capability plus external capability.
Right. And I think the practical issue is like you can't wait for this ecosystem to improve while you are spending money live, right? Like you'd rather have an imperfect solution than nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
And building your own imperfect solution or getting an imperfect solution off the shelf will help you more than sitting on your hands waiting for the retailers to get their act together and measurement
which
difficulty to improve.
Which is not happening anytime soon. So Jack, thanks so much for joining me. I'll leave obviously your LinkedIn profile in the show notes in case I think you have a lot of knowledge to share. So I invite people to get in touch with you. And thanks to all our listeners for tuning in. And we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG Guys. Have a great one.